Please be seated. Got any friends today that want to come up for a little chat? Heidi. Right. Hey, what's going on? Here comes Harrison. All right. So I got some cool things over here we can look at. All right. Let's look at this table here. What is on this table? Lots of crosses, yeah. Do you see one that you really like? Harrison, why don't you take that one? You see ones you really like? You like that one? Okay, that's a good one to take. Oh, I knew you were going to grab that one. I'm going to grab this one too. And this one. And this one. All right. How about we take a seat for a minute? Yeah, we can grab that one too. He looks a little different, doesn't he, on that one? Yeah. All right, so maybe you can tell me a little bit about the crosses that you got in your hand. Yeah, that one's when he was crucified. And what does that say at the top? Can you read that? Inri? You do? I-N-R-I. Okay. Harrison, what do you got there? That's a very colorful cross. Yes. What do you have there? You have a cross made out of nails. That's very sharp. How many nails are in that? 4? Do you think? Let's check it out again. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 nails. Interesting. What do you think about this one? That has a circle with lots of, and a cross, yeah, very funky lines too, right? This is a Celtic cross. What about this one? How many crosses are in this one? 5. Yeah, a big cross and 4 small ones. Sometimes they call this a Jerusalem cross. What about this one? What's different about this one than yours, Heidi? He has a hat. He has a crown on, kind of like that. No, he's not wearing any clothes in this one, and he's wearing a lot of clothes in that one. Right? He's got sandals on that one. He's ready to go on this one. Yeah. So this one, they call this one Christus Rex. So Christ the King. And who's in there? Christ the King. You can tell he's a king because he's got his crown on. And what is he holding in his hand? A cross and a circle. They call that an orb. Yeah. And an orb, right, that's a sign of royalty. And so this is Christus Rex. Heidi, yours with Jesus on it as he was crucified, they call that a crucifix, right? It's only a crucifix if it has the body of Jesus on it. They call that the corpus. They have 5 nails in that one. Now, I know why there's 4 nails, but do you know why there's 5 in that cross? There's 4 and then there's 1 in the middle. Well, those are the 5 wounds of Jesus. So where was Jesus wounded? In his hands and in his feet. And then he was pierced in his side. So that's why they see 5 a lot. This one's still, we call this one kind of in the beginning. He's got a lot of clothes on, so that's Christus Rex right there. It does look a little weird. Yeah, I know. It's not a very pleasant thing. Do you see any other crosses maybe around here? There's lots of them around. On the walls, yet those are the stations of the cross. So in the Bible, when it tells us about the passion of Jesus, yep, there's a lot up there. That one right behind the altar, that's St. Luke's cross. And if you look at the base of it, it's got a gold ox with wings for St. Luke. Yes, There's one right there. Whose name is on the back of that? Mine. Cool. There's one right there. Now, what kind is that, Heidi? Do you remember?
That kind.
It's that kind. What do we call that kind? Yes. Crucifix. Yes. Okay. Sometimes if you look in the chapel, there's one, and it has IHS on it. Have you ever heard about IHS before? Some people say that means in his service. But it really is the first three letters of the Greek word Jesus. And then sometimes you'll see that one with a P and an X. What do you think the P and the X means? You don't know? I had to look it up before service too. That is a symbol called the Chi-Rho. And that's the first two letters of the Greek word Christ. Right? But you want to know what my favorite cross is in the whole wide world? It's this one right here. I gotta get up. And it's because it's got some of Miss Penny's candy in it. Go ahead. You want another one? We can have more than one. All right. Will you help me put the crosses back on the table? Or I should say crucifix, right? Right. If you know where to go, you can always find candy in the church. All right. Thanks, friends. See if you can find some really cool ones today, all right? Let me know about them. I got a lot of them in my office too, yeah. That's where the candy came from. All right. Well, have fun today, y'all. All right? So whenever I encounter healing stories in the Bible, it's inevitable that I think back on my time when I spent working alongside seasoned chaplains, psychiatrists, and their aides at Pine Rest Mental Health Hospital in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It was part of my formal education. It was a way to serve, for me to get some practical experience in ministry before I made my way into a vocational life dedicated to parish ministry. Some of the skills that are needed to navigate clinical life often find their way into parochial life. That shouldn't surprise anyone, because both deal with the fact that most of our time is spent listening. And I thank for God for that. I still do. I thank God in the beginning that talking on my end wasn't a high priority for my supervisor. As a matter of fact, if you could keep visits under 50 words, you were highly praised. Sort of that was the meaning behind show up and be quiet, right? But mainly I thanked God in those moments that talking really wasn't to be a priority for me because I was terrified. Terrified I was going to say something wrong. Terrified that I was going to make an error that couldn't be corrected. And this was unlike my previous job as a carpenter, right? Where if I made a mistake, I could just go grab another piece of wood. It was different this time because I was working with people. Now I thank God for a different reason, and that is in learning that if we listen to folks, if we really, really listen to them, people will say the words they need to hear to heal themselves. And what is more, they will do it without knowing they're doing it. And so I think it's our job, sort of as Christians, to reflect back to them what they said. Not by embellishing it, not by emphasizing it, but through a process of active listening where the person that we're speaking to or listening to knows that we heard them and that we understood them. It seems simple enough, but oftentimes there are feelings in those moments or questions posed in those encounters that are extremely charged, especially when it comes to faith. And because of that, we usually end up not doing what we sought out to do in the first place, which I think is born out of a genuine desire to companion them in their time of need. I think varying from that desire has a lot to do with the way that we perceive ourselves in these relationships. Our role as a friend, a confidant, or indeed a counselor. All those who wish to help, yes? It's just that sometimes we end up making things worse by trying to fix things. Trying to fix it. Not always, but sometimes. I learned this lesson yet again this past Friday at Max Legatsky's funeral. As part of planning that service, I leaned heavily on Dean Zervis, Max's longtime friend, in hopes that he would be able to somehow summon up the ability to offer a meaningful and memorable reflection, not only to honor Max, but to honor those who had gathered to give witness to his life. As you might guess, Dr. Zervis did not disappoint. He is now known as Eulogy Dean. He's given this title as a distinction of honor, but also by contrast. Because I learned that Dean's friendship was so deep with Max that Max named his youngest son after Dean Legatsky. And if that's not a mark of love, I don't know what it is. Of course, Dean said he dodged a bullet because Dean's real name is Constantine, right? Dodged a big Greek bullet there, right? What I loved about that service was that Dean got up here and he was intentional about talking about friendship, especially in the way that it had to do with Max in the latter part of his life. And Dean's conclusion hit home with me. He said Max was having a lot of health problems. And he said it's tempting as friends to try to fix it, to do whatever you can to fix it. But when your friends find themselves in the mud heap, you have to fight against the urge to reach in and pull them out, to rescue and to fix, because sometimes, he said, the true mark of a friend is to enter the mud heap with them and wait. Enter the mud heap and wait until they say they are ready. Wait, in other words, to hear from them the words they need to say in order to heal. And then, in companionship with them, working together, grace has all the more room to abound. I say this in the face of a gospel lesson that we get this morning that speaks of miraculous healings. With Jesus, it seems that things can change on a dime. And so I remember someone once asked, how can we read these stories about Jesus the exorcist? How can we read these stories about Jesus the healer without feeling a little cheated these days? In the Gospels, in the book that we read, it seems like God only has to will it. God only has to will it. And people are healed. But the majority of what I see these days is suffering. Suffering, with love being the almighty counterbalance. There is a flaw, I think, in our common talk about health and sickness and how that relates to our faith. Because while there is this persistent emphasis on personal responsibility for keeping ourselves healthy, there is the other side of that coin, that sometimes things happen to people because of things outside their control. This usually has us seeking out what is responsible for the change in one's condition, or a reason behind it, because as it has been said before, everything happens for a reason. Interesting that in some cases we pray to God for the alleviation of an illness, while at the same time trusting that the same God has a reason for everything. Does God will that person's suffering then? Is he obtuse to the fact that this person is going through what they're going through? I can't abide by that. As a matter of fact, I think if anything would make Jesus angry, it would surely be the charge that God wills the suffering and persistence of evil in this world. I mean, even Jesus does not escape suffering and death. And he exercises the healing power of God. And maybe that's it. The part about the cross that we teach our kids about. That even Jesus didn't escape suffering or death. And that love is the ultimate counterbalance to us who can see with eyes wide open that the world we are living in is perishing. To say it out loud like that, it doesn't make it any less beautiful. It makes it poignant. What did the writer of Hebrews say? What this? Therefore, he had to become like his brothers and sisters in every respect, so that he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in the service of God, to make a sacrifice of atonement for the sins of the people, because he himself was tested by what he suffered. He is able to help those who are suffering themselves. And so to channel Dr. Zervis, if I can, Jesus is the faithful witness to all of humanity's suffering. He's there in the mud pit, in the hospital room, in the doctor's office, in burning buildings, on the battlefield, and at the graveside. I think, in a sense, waiting for us to say the words we need to hear to heal ourselves. And when we do, he will be there because he is faithful. He never left. And with him, there is plenteous redemption. It says, like right in Scripture, that Jesus is the closest to those who are brokenhearted. And I've learned that redemption comes in a myriad of ways. But one of the hallmarks of it is that it almost always ends up in reintegration with the community. whether that is in memory or in the immediacy of the present moment. There is a move from isolation into integration. And the most lasting integrations involve a considerable amount of grace. And somehow that grace leads to peace. And so, as another one of our friends, Pam Hansen has said, pray the prayers. Pray all of them. And let the rest on faith. And as we do that, as we follow our good friend's advice, may we recall that the language of prayer most often comes in the form of silence, in the form of listening first. And through that listening, we might just hear, I think, what we've always longed to hear. I am here. Take my hand.